So as a lot of you know, I'm a huge fan and collector of Cartoon Network home media, primarily VHS tapes and DVDs. But there has always been a strange way that Warner Brothers has released these over the years, and some fairly nonsensical patterns. I think the best way to show this is just by jumping right in. First off, let's talk about the VHS side of things. And what better way to start than by one of the most annoying for collectors, and most inconsistent, slipcover tapes and clamshell tapes. For those unaware, it's simple. A slipcover tape is simply a VHS that's a slip sleeve cover, and a clamshell case, well, a tape that has a box that opens and closes like a clam shell. What's annoying about it is the fact that only some tapes are released in one format or the other, and sometimes they're released in both. So it can make for an awkward time setting up your displays, especially if some tapes of a series are in a clamshell and you can't fit that fat bastard in with the rest of them. The Cartoon Network VHS tapes that are only released in clamshell are Scooby-Doo Arabian Nights, The Flintstones Stone Age Adventures, Johnny Quest vs. the Cyber Insect, and Cartoon Network's Cartoon Crack-Ups. The three here that kind of make your collection look off are the Johnny Quest, Scooby-Doo, and Flintstone ones. Since those are the only three tapes of their respective tape series that received a clamshell, so it makes displaying them look a bit weird. Which is fine, I guess. If these are what they consider to be their bigger releases that are deserving of a clamshell case, then sure. But no. Of course, it gets more messed up. Case in point, the holiday tapes. All of the holiday tapes were released in slipcover cases. However, a select few were also released simultaneously in clamshell cases. Yeah, isn't that weird? The Flintstones Christmas Carol, the Flintstones I Yabba Dabba Doo, and the Halloween Tree all had a clamshell case released as well. Why? What was the point of that? Why not give all the holiday tapes the option of slipcover or clamshell at that point? Because now it all looks messed up on the shelf. And then to make matters worse, you have the black clamshell cases that were only released for Dexter's Laboratory and the Powerpuff Girls. I mean, sure, they look alright, but come on, guys. Consistency. Why are these the only ones that had them? Why did these not get regular clamshell case releases? But, okay, sure. I'll put them up on my shelf and, hey, at least they'll be consistent with each other. Wait, what the heck is this? Really? Meet the Beatles never got a black clamshell release? Oh, you've gotta be kidding me. They went that far, they made it all the way to the last tape that they were going to release, and they didn't bother with a clamshell. And then to make the situation even worse, the two films of the Powerpuff Girls, being the movie and 'Twas the Fight Before Christmas, are in a regular clamshell case. What the heck? Could it kill you guys to be any more consistent? I mean, look at this. It's a mess. Thankfully, they were all also released in slipcover. So just display those ones and tell those clamshells to go jump over a fence. Fun fact, Samurai Jack's VHS is actually the only movie release that does not have a clamshell counterpart. But enough about the boxes and let's move on to some other inconsistencies. Do you guys remember Blockbuster? Yeah, I love Blockbuster. Every now and again, they would actually release some exclusive VHS tapes that you could only get from them. And for us, one of those tapes is Scooby-Doo, the Ghoul, the Bat, and the Ugly, and To Switch a Witch. Now, don't get me wrong, this exclusive tape is cool and all, but why was this tape the only one that received a Blockbuster exclusive? It's not like this was a special movie or anything. It's just a bunch of Scooby-Doo episodes. Heck, this tape even received a regular release as well. What gives? Speaking of Scooby-Doo, let me talk about these logos for a second. They start off looking all nice and neat, classic Scooby-Doo all across. They ended up making a new version of this with a spiffier logo and even a big picture of Scooby-Doo at the bottom. Way to go, above and beyond. So we're looking good, and then... Uh-oh, what's this? What happened? I know Scooby gets scared, but now the title itself is turning white. And this logo continues throughout the entire holiday set of tapes. So, okay, maybe they felt the need to change it for the holiday tapes. Yeah, even a Yogi Bear tape has some generic-looking font. Well, wait a minute. Why is the Flintstones logo the same? And the other Yogi Bear holiday tape still has its classic logo. So what's going on? Is there any rhyme or reason to any of this? Okay, so now we're getting into some fun stuff. Did you know that some Cartoon Network VHS tapes had a double release, with one version being a Spanish dub? Yeah, and these are pretty rare and hard to find nowadays. I only managed to find one, and it's of the Flintstones Stone Age Adventures. But apparently there also exists Spanish versions of the Powerpuff Girls and the Josie and the Pussycats tapes. Now, while that is cool and all, I mean, you want as many people to watch a show as possible, but why only those shows? You don't think your Spanish-speaking audience might have wanted to see any of your other shows? Another bizarre thing revolving Flintstones VHS tape inconsistencies is how they decided what tapes would receive Cartoon Network versions. Yeah, so each of the Flintstones VHS tapes that were released under Cartoon Network's branding also had a near identical release under Hanna-Barbera's branding. However, what's weird here is that tapes like Bedrock and Roll and Hooray for Holly Rock got re-released under the Cartoon Network branding. However, other tapes that were released under the same type of branding at Hanna-Barbera, such as Fred Takes the Field and Wacky Inventions, were not given a Cartoon Network release. What's even weirder about Fred Takes the Field not receiving a Cartoon Network bannered release is that in the Hanna-Barbera release, there was a mail-in rebate offer that featured 4 Flintstones VHS tapes, all of which received alternate Cartoon Network releases except for Fred Takes the Field. I wonder how they decided which tapes got releases under the Cartoon Network branding and which didn't. Speaking of tapes not released with the CN branding, they started doing a weird thing where the Cartoon Network logo would actually be on a sticker that was placed on the outside of the wrapper. So if you unwrapped the tape, you'd lose the logo. Which is fine, but it still makes things inconsistent. Scooby-Doo Goes Hollywood is like this, and yet other Scooby-Doo tapes have the logo. Other anime VHS tapes had the logo on them, and yet anime like Gundam Wing were released with the logo only on a sticker on the wrapper, not the box itself. In fact, that brings up another good argument. There are certain series that were released on VHS with Cartoon Network's logo, such as Big Bag. Like, okay, sure, Big Bag aired on Cartoon Network. They want to release the tapes with the logo, that's fine. But then you had other shows that you wonder why they didn't have the logo. Anime is a big example. Sailor Moon and Yu Yu Hakusho VHS tapes were released with the Cartoon Network logo, but not Dragon Ball Z? That show was their #1 hit at one point, and they couldn't even put their branding on the VHS tapes? You can't say it's a licensing issue or whatever either, since Funimation also released the Yu Yu Hakusho VHS tapes. Since we're on the topic of Yu Yu Hakusho and Sailor Moon, their releases are also a bit strange. Yu Yu Hakusho tapes do have the Cartoon Network logo, but only on the edited tapes and only for volumes 16 through 24. Sailor Moon has a bit of the opposite problem. The first 3 volumes of Sailor Moon don't have the Cartoon Network logo, however the rest of the series does. It's weird that the first few don't, but hey, at least they started to get their act together for the rest of them. What is interesting is Scary Godmother has a As Seen on Cartoon Network statement on the box, but doesn't have the logo. Why? That's an odd choice. Also, the sequel was never released on VHS. Now to get into a real chronological mess. The Totally Spies series. I loved this show as a kid, but the VHS tapes does not show them much respect. First of all, Volume 3 sticks out like a sore thumb due to its color change. What was the reason? I guess this was them trying to begin a type of change that would have continued onto future releases, but none came, so it just looks odd on the shelf. And the episodes are all messed up and out of order. Volume 1 has episodes 1, 12, 2, and 20. Volume 2 has episodes 3, 6, 4, and then the first episode from Season 2, episode 27. Volume 3 had episodes 8, 5, 9, and 7. I don't understand how this happened. I'm sure the episodes being in order doesn't really matter, since a lot of the episodes don't follow a particular storyline, but if you have the episodes and can release them in order, why wouldn't you? Another interesting thing to note is that certain VHS tape lines, such as The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, had additional VHS tapes released as a part of that specific line. but they were never released in North America. Actually, this is now a perfect segue into talking about the DVDs. This is where it's going to get messy, because you have so many half-assed and incredibly inconsistent releases, it's almost insane. If I had $1 for every time Cartoon Network started to release a show on DVD to only stop it prematurely, well, I wouldn't be a millionaire, but I'd probably have at least $10. Who remembers when they started an entire new line of DVDs called the Hall of Fame Collection? They released the first seasons of Johnny Bravo, Dexter's Lab, Courage, only for them to not do anything else. So many possibilities. They created an entire line of DVDs that had an illustrious name, and yet they did absolutely nothing with it. Granted, Courage did end up getting finished up later on, with an astounding 4-year release date difference between Season 1 and Season 2, but at least that one finished. It even ended up getting a complete series set shortly after, so why didn't they finish the others? Maybe Courage sold the most out of all of them? I don't know. Believe it or not, while some DVDs did not continue in the US to subsequent volumes or seasons, they did continue in other countries, such as the Ed, Edd n Eddy and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends season sets. This is incredibly disappointing, because I know I would have loved to have had them as a kid. And to look on your shelf and forever see incomplete DVD series lines is just depressing. Ben 10 is a line of DVDs that is so wild. They actually release their DVDs in a bit of a backwards fashion. Normally, DVDs release volume sets that contain a small handful of episodes, and eventually that leads to a season set release. However, Ben 10 started out with season releases, finishing up the entire first series at its Season 4 DVD. But when Alien Force starts up, we get hit with volume releases that only contain a couple of episodes per disc. This is just so strange. But it gets even weirder. The original Ben 10 years later started back up with volumes, with a new line titled Ben 10 The Hero Collection. However, they only ever released one DVD, which was for Forearms. With a title like The Hero Collection, you'd have thought they intended to release multiple DVDs in this line, each highlighting a different hero from Ben 10. But they didn't. What happened? How do you go through all this effort to create an entirely new and separate DVD line, only to release one and then that's it? What a waste of time.
Correction. It turns out there actually was another release in the Hero Collection set, but it was actually for Heat Blast. Still, only having 2 releases out of this giant new line name is still a bit on the sad end.
Another line that was highlighted but only ever released one of is the Toonami version that got released for Gundam Wing the movie. You'd think that this would have had all the Dragon Ball Z movies as well as many other possibilities. Now that I'm back on the topic of anime DVDs, Case Closed and Naruto actually had DVDs that contained the Cartoon Network logo. But boy, is that as inconsistent as ever. Naruto doesn't even start having the logo on DVDs until volume 21. And Case Closed has them on all their single releases until they get to the season sets, which have a very similar case art design, but no Cartoon Network logo. Certain Adult Swim show DVDs would contain the Cartoon Network logo, which led to confusion by parents. Which makes sense. If I'm a parent and I see a cartoon with Cartoon Network's logo, I should be able to assume that it's safe for my kids to watch. I know why Cartoon Network did it at the time, but I'm glad they realized that it wasn't the best decision and stopped it. Batman, the Brave and the Bold is also a release that's incredibly annoying when it comes to Cartoon Network's logo. You had the volume set releases, and they were fine, all contained the Cartoon Network logo on the back of the box. Then you had the season sets, released in parts, all of which had the logo, until you got to Season 3. Season 3 is the only one out of 8 DVDs that doesn't have the logo. Come on, are you telling me you couldn't add the logo on for the final release? You made it to the very end and finally decided you weren't going to make it all streamlined? At least the slipcovers were nice. Except for, wait a minute, why doesn't Season 2 Part 1 have a slipcover and all the others do? Are you kidding me? Look at this, it sticks out horribly. Whose decision was this? Speaking of slipcovers, I always found it odd how they chose what got slipcovers and what didn't. Like, Foster's Season 1 got a slipcover, and while it's cool and all, how come none of the other shows got them? Like for Ed, Edd n Eddy Season 1. Ben 10's Season 1 has a weird story too. So they released it with a slipcover that had a picture of Ben. Take the sleeve off, and you reveal Heat Blast on the actual cover. That's kind of cool. But when this DVD got re-released without a slipcover, they actually used the slipcover's art of Ben on the actual cover art. Who remembers snap cases? Yeah, I always found these to be the strangest things, but Cartoon Network didn't release too many like this. The Powerpuff Girls DVDs had them, as well as Season 1 of Kids Next Door, the early Halloween and Christmas DVDs, some Scooby-Doo DVDs, the Samurai Jack movie, and the DVD version of Cartoon Crack-Ups. I wonder how they chose what releases got these, and who even made these to begin with. So weird. Another interesting trend they tried to do was around 2008 when they started releasing DVDs with almost identical spines featuring a white background, the title of the show, and then a colored spot at the bottom of the spine displaying the volume number. While some might argue that it looks a bit lazy and maybe bland, I actually think it looks cool when they're all side by side. Cartoon Network would re-release DVDs for their 20th anniversary with new slipcovers. And not to say it wasn't cool, but their choices were a bit odd. 2 Adventure Time DVDs, Ben 10 Season 4, Mad TV, Regular Show, The Flintstones, The Smurfs, and Tom and Jerry Tales. Kind of not really all-encompassing. You'd think maybe a few more shows from the mid-2000s. Like, why 2 Adventure Time DVDs? One of those could have been an Ed, Edd n Eddy or a Powerpuff Girls DVD. Not bad choices, just strange. The 30th anniversary was aiming to be better with a lot of potential promises made, but they all fell short. We only got 2 complete series box sets, one for Ed, Edd n Eddy and one for Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. But I gotta say, what piss-poor releases. They just reused the DVDs for seasons that had already come out prior. And then for the additional seasons, just made some BS, low-energy, low-effort menus with no special features or anything. Just the episodes. How boring. And finally, I'd like to just bring a note to the And Friends releases. There have been a lot of these for many different shows and series, but they did do a Cartoon Network and Friends set of releases, and I just, again, find it odd the choices they went with. Regular Show, Gumball, Ben 10, Powerpuff Girls, Samurai Jack, Flapjack, and Chowder. This is a lot, but I will say I wonder why they decided to stop and only do these few. Not bad choices, but could have definitely been more. You know, all I really gotta say is you'd think with a network as popular as Cartoon Network, that they'd have released all their shows in a complete series set that are all organized and full of extras, but no. Instead, it's a disaster.